since my husband passed. It's just me and my two cats now. I wake up early in the morning usually and open the sliding door so they can sit and look through the screen. The small nighttime animals get their attention. One morning, they caught the attention of something else. I was making tea and just sat down to read a book. Both my cats started hissing and snarling. They get into it sometimes, so I shouted at them to knock it off. They hissed again, and then came running through the living room like bats out of hell. I figured a raccoon or something must have startled them. I didn't want the screen getting torn up again, so I got out of my chair to close the door. When I turned to face it, I was stunned by what I saw. To this day, I wake up in a cold sweat some nights when I dream of it. Standing on the other side of the screen was a massive thing. It looked like an orangutan, but taller than me and twice as wide. It completely filled the doorway. The tea kettle whistled sharply, and the noise grabbed my attention for a moment. When I looked back, the creature was gone. I slid the door shut, closed all the curtains, and hid in the bathroom until the sun came up. When I felt safe enough, I drove to my neighbor's cabin. I casually asked if she'd seen anything strange lately. She said she hadn't seen anything but had been hearing some strange noises at night. I didn't want to tell her what I saw. She couldn't believe me. Hell, I barely believe it myself.
This past Friday night, I had just left a friend's apartment on Montrose and was making my way back to my car when I saw an old woman dancing in the middle of the street. Her arms were outstretched, and her eyes were closed, lost in the rhythm of the music that only she could hear. At first, I thought it was strange, but also somewhat beautiful. The lovely moment quickly turned to a nightmare as the woman opened her eyes and saw me standing there. Her face twisted into an angry scowl, and she started running towards me with alarming speed. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Her speed was that frightening. The old woman was getting closer and closer, her eyes now blazing with a fierce intensity. I could hear her ragged breathing and the sound of her feet pounding the pavement. I finally could move, and I ran down the nearby alley, hiding behind a couple garbage cans. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure the old woman could hear it. I waited there for several minutes until I was sure that it was safe to come out. When I couldn't hear or see her, I moved quietly to the end of the alley. When I came out at the end of the block, I could hear the rhythmic tapping and shuffling of feet. I don't know if it was the dancing woman, but I doubled back and came out between two houses and crossed the street. I got into my car and drove away, grateful to be out of Ravenswood Manor and away from that crazy old woman. My girlfriend, Lena, and I were visiting Arizona for a friend's wedding. Driving back to the hotel that night, we experienced what I can only call a waking nightmare. She pointed out a large coyote running along the road. Somehow, it was keeping pace with our rental. I slowed a bit to get a better look. This thing was mangy, but immense. Never seen a coyote like it before. It gained a burst of speed and veered in front of our car. I swerved to avoid it, but we ended up in a ditch. We were shaken, but neither of us was hurt. Lena gasped and pointed to the windshield. The coyote was standing in front of the car, but it was changed. It was standing upright on its hind legs. It swayed side to side, shifting weight from one foot to the other. We didn't know what to do. I thought it was going to rush the car when a set of headlights came over the rise. The creature snarled and bounded into the darkness. The driver must have seen our headlights off the road. He slowed down and called out, asking if we needed help. He gave us a lift to Tuba City, and the next morning, a tow truck brought our car in. I don't know what would have happened if that guy didn't show up when he did. I don't think it would have been a happy ending for us. When I was a kid, growing up in northern New Jersey, our neighborhood butted up to a long stretch of forest that extended up through New York into Canada. There was lots of wildlife, the usual stuff and something rarer. Across the road from my home was a lone lamppost. In those days, I often stayed up at night and watched animals come and go. One night, I woke up and looked out the window. The street was dark and quiet. The neighborhood garbage cans were lined up along the sidewalk. I saw motion in the nearby trees. It looked like something bigger than a raccoon for sure. When it came out into the open, I saw it clearly. It was a large figure stepping into the cone of light. I couldn't understand what I was looking at. Was it a bear? No, I had seen a few black beads before. It looked like a man, a big hairy man. He was much bigger than my dad, who was more than 6 feet tall. This thing wasn't natural. It looked wrong. I watched as this creature moved from can to can, carefully opening the lid, pulling out some trash to eat, and then quietly replacing the lid. I don't know how long I watched it. It felt like ages, but it must have only been a few minutes. He was moving swiftly like he did this all the time. I lost sight of him when he moved out of the light. It wasn't the last time I encountered the creature, but that's a story for another day. I was on I-90 at night, somewhere between Wall and Kadoka. I'd been driving all day, and I was dreaming of a warm bed. Suddenly, I was blinded. Headlights were in my lane, heading straight at me, or so I thought. Some idiot was going the wrong way on the highway. I veered onto the shoulder, and I readied myself to lean on the horn and flip the guy off. Then the lights turned straight up and split apart, did some twirls, and joined back together. They shot up into the sky and rocketed south toward the Badlands, over a billboard for Wall Drug. I tried to watch where they were headed, but they were gone almost instantly. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to decide if I actually saw something or if I was more tired than I thought. I was jarred back to my senses when an oversized pickup flew past me. I figured it didn't make much of a difference anyway, so I continued on my route. I had a terrifying encounter with something evil at my family's lake house. A group of friends and myself rented a place on a lake for just a fun-filled, drunken weekend. We were all in our young to mid-20s, and it was supposed to be just a big party. For the most part, that's what it was. The Friday night and Saturday morning we pretty much went all out, having a blast on the water and just doing fun, stupid stuff. Well, naturally, when Saturday afternoon rolled around, we were all so dead from going all out we decided it would be a night of drinking and just kind of having a chill evening and night. So 9 p.m. comes rolling around, and about 8 of us were inside the house and 5 outside. The house was a two-story with a second-story deck, back porch, and it was surrounded by the woods. Then past the woods you would hit the lake. I'll mention that we had already experienced some weird vibes from the locals when we first arrived in town. Mostly just backcountry old-timers that I assumed were leering and irritated because we were a bunch of college-aged kids looking to have a good time. But the town and the lake were large, so it's not like anyone knew where we were staying. My friend and I were sitting on the patio, just getting lost in conversation, and all of a sudden there was this weird feeling that encompassed us. Like an unnerving physical experience that came from the woods behind us. It was so strong we both kind of quieted down, and then out of nowhere this loud chanting abruptly came from the woods. I have no idea how far away it was because of how the lake is set up, but I'm pretty sure the voice is carried up through the forest. It sounded like a cult chanting away, and all of the voices were male. I mean, they were loud and perfectly in sync. I think we were frozen for all of about 20 seconds before I couldn't contain myself and darted towards the house with her following me. I don't know how to explain the feeling that came with that chanting, but it was almost evil, like just something so powerfully uninviting. I was shaking by the time we got up to the second story and ran out on the balcony with the others, one of them my brother. By the time we got up there, the chanting was gone, and I naturally asked, "Did you guys hear that?" in the most shaky, freaked-out voice. They all had heard it, and not seconds later the chanting began again. So the five of us are out there peering into the forest, listening to this chanting that would sometimes sound far away and then sound relatively close. All male voices in the weirdest language, or I don't even know what it was, sounded like a strange extreme church. Then following the chanting, a loud bang like someone hit a huge metal object sounded, and then the worst part came, a man wailing, like an extreme pain wailing. All of my hair was up. It was the freakiest experience ever. My brother and I were staring at each other in a mixture of scared excitement and horror. The wailing stopped, and then it was back to the chanting, which eventually died out. I was so freaked out by it I wanted to call the cops, cause whoever screamed had been in a lot of pain. That mixed with the weird chanting made me immediately think some terrible sacrifice was going on. One friend tried to say it had to be some drunk guys just messing around singing and being weird, but no way was that coming from some drunk guys. They were perfectly incensed, then the bang, and then the wail of pain, and then all that weird tension and energy was just gone. Nope. I didn't call the cops, and I wish I would've, but honestly the forest was so large, and since the lake house was up looking down at the woods and lake, it could have been anywhere. It definitely wasn't in our close proximity, but it was close enough to hear all of that perfectly. We went in and got some of the others, but by the time they came out the chanting had stopped. Someone wanted to go explore and find where it had been coming from, but obviously it was a stupid idea. After that, I was so ready to go home. I can't explain the relief of driving away from there the next morning. Even now it gives me the worst feeling. Whatever that was, it felt so wrong and evil. I'll never forget that moment. I can only imagine it was some weird cult stuff. Follow for more horror stories.